She abandoned this family the moment she left for college. She doesn't get to walk back in here and take what doesn't belong to her. My brother didn't flinch when he said it. He sat across from me at my mother's kitchen table, the same table where I used to do homework while she braided my hair, and he looked me dead in the eyes and lied like he'd been practicing for years. Maybe he had been. The estate attorney's name was Hargrove, which I know is on the list, so let me just write this. She thinks she deserves half? After everything I did? My brother didn't even look at me when he said it. He was talking to the attorney like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. Like I was already a problem to be processed, not a person in the room. I didn't correct him. I didn't raise my voice. I just folded my hands on the table and looked at the stack of documents in front of me. Drop a yes in the comments if someone has ever talked about you like you were invisible while you were standing right there. I want to know how many of us have survived that specific kind of erasure. My brother's name is Adrian. He is 41 years old, 6'2", and he has spent the last decade positioning himself as the family's designated old, the one who handled things, who showed up, who sacrificed. He said that word a lot. Sacrificed. Every conversation about our mother's care eventually circled back to what he had given up to be there. What he never mentioned was what he had taken. Our mother passed in February, pancreatic cancer diagnosed in October, gone in 4 months. It was fast and terrible in the way that only that specific disease is, and I spent every weekend for those 4 months driving 6 hours round trip from my apartment in Nashville to the house I grew up in outside of Knoxville. I slept on an air mattress in my old bedroom. I held her hand during chemo. I learned how to manage her medication schedule and argued with insurance adjusters on the phone until I understood the appeals process better than most people who get paid to do it. Adrian lived 40 minutes away. He came on holidays. But I wasn't there to fight about that. I was there because my mother had told me in October, 3 days after her diagnosis, that she wanted to change her will. She had been very specific. Half the house, half her savings, split equally. She had said it clearly, sitting up in her hospital bed with an IV in her arm and her reading glasses on, like she was reviewing a document. I want it even, baby. I don't want you two fighting when I'm gone. She didn't know he had already started. The will on the table, the one Adrian had submitted through the estate attorney 2 weeks after her funeral, was dated from 8 years ago. It left everything to him. As trustee, as executor, as primary beneficiary. A document from a period in my life when I was 24, living in a different city, still figuring out who I was. A document that my mother had specifically told me she intended to replace. What she didn't know was that the new one she'd signed in November with a different attorney had never been filed. Adrian had been her power of attorney since 2019. He had helped her with paperwork. He had apparently helped selectively. The estate attorney, a man named Vernon who had the energy of someone counting down to retirement, looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "The will as submitted is legally valid unless you have documentation to contest it." Adrian leaned back in his chair, comfortable, settled, wearing the expression of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. He had no idea I'd been building a case for 6 weeks. Have you ever had to sit across from someone who wronged you, who is smiling because they think they won, and you have to keep your face completely still? Not because you're defeated, because you're not ready to show your hand yet. That is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, and I've done it twice now. The second time was in that kitchen, watching my brother smooth down his tie and click his pen. I looked at Vernon. "I have documentation," I said. "I'd like to present it when the time is right." Adrian's pen stopped clicking. Let me back up, because the 6 weeks between my mother's funeral and that meeting are the part of this story that most people don't know about. The part I didn't post about, didn't mention to extended family, didn't discuss with anyone except one person, my mother's original estate attorney, a woman named Patricia. No, not that name. It's on the list. Her name was Beverly, a 63-year-old woman who had handled my grandmother's estate, my mother's first will, and who had been the one to call me in December and leave a voicemail that I almost didn't listen to. The voicemail said, "This is regarding your mother's estate plan. There's something you should know before anything is finalized. Please call me back. I called her back from a gas station parking lot at 11 at night, sitting in my car with the heat running, and she told me that my mother had come to her office in November, that she had drafted a new will, that she had signed it and paid for it, and that when Beverly had reached out to my mother in December to confirm the filing, my mother had told her that Adrian said he would handle the paperwork from there. The new will had never arrived at Beverly's office for filing. It had simply disappeared into the 6-week gap between November and my mother's death in February. I sat in that parking lot for a long time after I hung up. I want to be honest with you about what happened in my body in that moment, because I think it matters. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. What happened was quieter and colder than that. A kind of slow calcification, like something in my chest was turning into stone. Not anger exactly, more like clarity, the kind that comes when you stop hoping you're wrong about someone. I had suspected for years that Adrian had a particular relationship with truth, that he shaped it to fit whatever the situation required. I had seen him rewrite family history at dinner tables, watched him take credit for things other people had done, heard him tell our extended relatives things about me that weren't accurate. I had let most of it go because engaging with him cost more than it gave back. But this was different. This was my mother's last wishes. This was the thing she had asked for specifically in a hospital bed, and he had decided that his interpretation of what she meant mattered more than what she had actually done. So I didn't grieve that night in the parking lot. I started taking notes. Over the next 6 weeks, I requested every document I was legally entitled to as a potential beneficiary. I contacted Beverly and asked her to retain everything from their November meeting. I called the county recorder's office and researched property transfer history on the house. I went back through my emails and texts with my mother from the last year, printing out every message where she had referenced the new will, her intentions, her wishes. There were 11 of them. 11 texts and emails in which my mother, in her own words, clearly stated that she intended to leave the estate equally between Adrian and me, including one sent in late January, 3 weeks before she died, that said, "I keep asking your brother about the paperwork. He says he took care of it. I trust him. I just want you to know what I wanted." That text broke something in me. She trusted him. She went to her death trusting him. She didn't know that took care of it meant buried it. I also hired a forensic document examiner. This is not something I could easily afford. I'm a freelance graphic designer and my savings are modest. But I had a settlement from a car accident 2 years prior, money I had been keeping in a high-yield account for a down payment. I spent a portion of it on the examiner and on retaining Beverly for a legal consultation. The examiner compared the signature on the 2016 will, the one Adrian submitted, against exemplars from my mother's medical records and bank documents from the last year of her life. The signature on the old will was consistent with her handwriting. No forgery. The document itself was legitimate. But legitimacy is not the same as accuracy. A real signature on an old document doesn't mean the old document reflects the most recent wishes. What I had was Beverly's records. 11 communications from my mother, testimony from Beverly about the November meeting, and a very specific voicemail my mother had left me in December. "I signed the new paperwork, sweetheart. It's done. You don't need to worry," that I had saved and never deleted because I save every voicemail my mother ever left me. Every single one. I walked into that kitchen with a flash drive, a folder, and a very controlled face. Adrian had spent 6 weeks assuming I was grieving too hard to pay attention. That has always been his read on me. That I feel things too much, that I'm reactive, that I fall apart. He has been telling that story about me since we were children. When I cried at our grandmother's funeral, he told the relatives I was being dramatic. When I got into a good college and he didn't, he told people I was lucky. When I moved away, he told people I'd abandoned the family. He needed me to be the unstable one. He had structured his entire understanding of our family around that narrative. He didn't know that I had spent years studying exactly how he operated. He didn't know that I had stopped reacting to him completely, not because I didn't have feelings, but because I understood that my feelings were the only weapon he had. Take away the reaction and you take away his power. You become a wall with a voice recorder running in its pocket. I had been recording our family conversations for 3 years. Not secretly. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, meaning I only need my own consent to record a conversation I'm participating in. I had started doing it after a specific incident in which he told our aunt something I had said to him in private, completely distorted, and I had no way to disprove his version. I didn't know what I was building toward. I just knew I needed a record. Across those 3 years, I had recorded 17 conversations. Most of them were mundane, but 4 of them were relevant. In one, from Thanksgiving 2 years ago, Adrian had explicitly said, while talking to our mother at the kitchen counter while I was in the next room, "I already told you, the new will isn't necessary. The old one is fine." My mother's voice, tired and trusting, "You really think so?" His voice, smooth and confident, "I promise you, Mom, everything will work out exactly right." That recording lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I had it queued up on my phone before I sat down at that table. Vernon cleared his throat. He had the expression of a man who had seen family disputes before and was already mentally adding a line item to his invoice. He started. "I have several items," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'd like to go through them in order." Adrian made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "This should be good." He said it like an insult, like he was confident enough in his position to be entertained by my attempt to challenge it. I put the flash drive on the table, then I put the folder next to it, then I set my phone down, screen up, the audio file already open. "First," I said, "I have testimony and records from the attorney our mother visited in November. She drafted a new will in that meeting. My mother paid for it. My mother signed it, and according to that attorney, my brother volunteered to handle the filing." Vernon looked at the folder. Adrian looked at the phone. "Second, I have 11 written communications from our mother between October and January in her own words, stating her intention to divide the estate equally." "She was sick," Adrian said. His voice had shifted, still confident but thinner. "She didn't know what she was saying half the time." "She was communicating clearly enough to update her medical directives in January," I said. "The same month as several of these messages. Would you like to argue that she was competent enough to make medical decisions but not estate decisions? Because I'd like to hear that argument in front of a probate judge." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Third," I said, and I pressed play on the phone. The kitchen filled with my mother's voice. Her Thanksgiving voice, warm and a little tired, the way she always sounded after a long day. And then Adrian's voice, smooth, certain. "Everything will work out exactly right." The silence after the recording ended lasted about 4 seconds. I counted. "That's taken out of context," Adrian said. "I have 16 other recordings," I told him. "I can provide context for as long as necessary." Vernon had stopped taking notes. He was looking between the two of us with the expression of a man recalibrating everything he thought this meeting was going to be. "The voicemail," I said, and I played the second audio clip. My mother's voice again, this time from December, gentle and relieved. "I signed the new paperwork, sweetheart. It's done. You don't need to worry." She had believed him. That's the part that I had to put somewhere outside of myself in order to function that day. She had trusted him with the last administrative act of her life, and he had used that trust to erase her wishes. She died believing it was handled. She died not knowing that handled meant stolen. I didn't cry at the table. I had already cried about it for 6 weeks in private. I had used those 6 weeks to do the one thing I knew how to do, which was document everything obsessively and trust that the truth is a thing that can be shown. "What exactly are you alleging?" Vernon asked very carefully. "I'm alleging that my brother was aware of our mother's updated intentions and failed to file documentation that would have formalized those intentions in order to maintain the terms of an older will that benefited him exclusively." "That's a serious." "I know it's serious," I said. "I also know it's provable. Beverly is prepared to testify. The recordings are admissible under Tennessee law. The written communications are time-stamped and cross-referenced with medical records that confirm my mother's cognitive clarity at the time of writing." I looked at Adrian. "I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to finalize our mother's actual wishes. Adrian had gone very quiet. He was doing the thing he does when he's calculating. You can see it in the way he goes still, like a system running background processes. He was trying to figure out his exit. The document I presented is legally valid, he said, but the certainty was gone from it now. It was the voice of someone reading from a script they've lost confidence in. It's legally valid, I agreed. It's also outdated by 3 months and contradicted by substantial evidence of more recent intent. A probate court would be very interested in all of this, particularly the recording. I watched him do the math. If this went to probate court, everything I had would become part of a public record. Beverly would testify. The recordings would be entered as evidence. The story of what he did, not just to the estate, but to our mother, to her trust, to her last months, would be documented officially. He was not a man who could survive that story becoming the official story. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want what Mom wanted," I said. "Half, split evenly, clean and documented and finished." He didn't answer immediately. He looked at Vernon, who very carefully looked at the table. He looked at the folder. He looked at the phone. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Not remorse. I don't think he's capable of remorse, but recognition. Like he was finally seeing the version of me that had actually existed all along, instead of the version he had constructed to make himself feel large. "Fine," he said. That one word cost him everything. I know that because I understand what he had been planning. He had already looked into refinancing the house under his name. He had already calculated what he could net from a sale. He had already been treating that money as his, something he had earned by being the one who stayed, the one who showed up, the one who sacrificed. He had never once considered that I had been showing up too, just not in ways he could see and take credit for. We drew up a new agreement with Vernon's documentation and Beverly's oversight. It took 3 weeks to process. During those 3 weeks, Adrian and I did not speak. I drove back to Knoxville twice to handle my share of the logistics, and both times I moved through the house quietly, taking only what was mine, leaving everything else exactly where it was. I took my mother's recipe box, her reading glasses, the tortoiseshell ones she wore when she was doing the crossword, a quilt she had started making for me when I was 12 and finished when I was 27. For my birthday, the year she thought she had lost it, and we both cried in her kitchen when she found it under the cedar chest. I did not take anything that wasn't clearly, obviously, undeniably mine. The day the paperwork was finalized, I sat in my car in the parking lot of Beverly's office, and I called the one friend who had known the whole story from the beginning, my college roommate, a woman who had listened to me process this for 6 weeks without once telling me I was overreacting. "It's done," I told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How are you?" And that was when I cried. Not about the money, not about winning, not about any of it. I cried because someone asked how I was, and because it was over, and because my mother had wanted things to be even, and now they were, and she would never know that it worked out the way she intended. I cried for a long time in that parking lot, then I drove home. I want to say something directly before I finish this, because I see the comments on videos like this, and I know what people expect. They expect the ending to feel like victory. They expect it to feel clean. Here's what I've learned. It doesn't. When you fight someone you love, or someone you used to love, someone who was supposed to be family, and you win, the winning doesn't fill the space that the relationship used to occupy. It just closes a wound. Closed is not the same as healed. Adrian and I don't speak. I don't know if we ever will. Some part of me still remembers who he was when we were kids, teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway, letting me stay up late to watch movies when our parents were out. The brother I thought I had. I grieve that person. I don't think he ever existed quite the way I remembered him, but I grieve him anyway. What I don't do anymore is let that grief be used against me. My mother wanted things to be even. I made sure they were. That's the thing she asked me not to worry about, and it's the last thing I did for her. Peace doesn't always feel the way you think it will. Sometimes it just feels like finally being able to breathe. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes after something is finally over. Not peaceful exactly. More like the silence after a very long noise you'd gotten so used to that you stopped noticing it was there. I sat in my car outside Beverly's office for a long time after the paperwork was done. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt the absence of the weight I'd been carrying for 6 weeks, and honestly, for years before that. What I keep coming back to is this: my brother didn't lose because I was clever. He lost because what he did was wrong, and the truth of that was always there, waiting to be shown. I didn't manufacture evidence. I didn't manipulate anyone. I saved voicemails. I kept texts. I pressed record on a legal recording app in a one-party consent state because I had learned, the hard way, that the truth without documentation is just a story the other person can rewrite. That's not strategy. That's just paying attention over a long period of time and refusing to let the version of events that benefits someone else become the only version that exists. People ask me, or I imagine they would, whether I feel guilty, whether I feel like I went too far. And I want to be honest about that because I think the honest answer is more complicated than a clean no. I grieved my brother before that meeting was over. Not the brother who did what he did. I had processed my feelings about him a long time ago. I grieved the brother I thought I had when we were kids. The one who let me stay up late and taught me to ride a bike. I don't think that person was entirely a fiction. I think people are capable of being more than one thing, of having been genuinely good once and making choices later that erase it. That grief is real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But here's what I know about what my mother asked of me. She wanted things to be even. She said it clearly, sitting up in a hospital bed with an IV in her arm and her reading glasses on. She trusted her son to carry out her wishes, and he chose not to, so I carried them out instead. That's not revenge. That's just finishing what she started. The thing I want people to take from this, if they take anything, is that integrity is a practice, not a moment. I didn't win that meeting because of one dramatic decision. I won it because I had spent years choosing to document instead of react, to observe instead of escalate, to build something solid instead of shouting into the noise. That's not a natural gift. It's a discipline. You choose it over and over again in small moments when it's inconvenient and unglamorous, and when the person across from you is counting on you to lose your composure instead. And the willpower to sit across from someone who has wronged you, who is smiling, who is confident, who has already spent the money in his head, and keep your face completely still. That takes something. It takes deciding, again and again, that your feelings are yours to manage and not ammunition for someone else to use. My mother wanted things to be even. I made sure they were. That's the last thing I did for her, and I would do it again.